Argentinian protester arrested yesterday after he got around security barriers and onto the race course in the final stretch of the Tour de France 11th stage.
Norwegian rider Jonas Abrahamsen won the 11th stage in a photo finish just ahead of Swiss rider Mauro Schmid, but their final sprint was accompanied by a man running alongside who wore a t-shirt saying, quote, Israel out of the Tour. A security guard ran out to apprehend the man.
Correspondent Gethin Kulbaugh says there are no Israeli cyclists in the event, but there is a team based in Israel with financing from a wealthy Canadian supporter. Prince Harry followed his late mother's footsteps by wearing a flak jacket and walking down a path in an active landmine field in Angola to raise awareness for a charity's work clearing explosives from old war zones. Harry is in the southern African country with the Halo Trust organization. Breaking news at townhall.com. President Trump has signed a bipartisan bill aimed at stopping the flow of fentanyl into the U.S.
Joined by parents who lost children to fentanyl overdoses, the president signed the Halt All Lethal Trafficking of Fentanyl Act.
And we take a historic step toward justice for every family touched by the fentanyl scourge.
Under the new law, the opioid will be classified as a Schedule I drug, which promises tougher prison sentences for those convicted with trafficking fentanyl. Greg Clugston, Washington.
The Justice Department has fired Maureen Comey, the daughter of former FBI Director James Comey, and a prosecutor in the federal case against Jeffrey Epstein. There reportedly was no specific reason given for her firing from the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York. More on these stories at townhall.com. I'm John Scott.
The following is an America Matters Media production. The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of the station or its advertisers, although we think they should. But that's the opinion of America Matters Media.
There we go. Welcome to the program. I am Mr. Constitution Douglas V. Gibbs, Mr. Constitution Hour by Douglas V. Gibbs. I am spending so much time preparing for the show, I didn't unmute my microphone there, so that's why there was a little bit of a pause there. I am Douglas V. Gibbs, DouglasVGibbs.com. Great to be here. Zachary Radio, America Matters Media. We've got, let's see, KPGF, we got FM 937, AM 1060 in Reno, Nevada. Also have the network, affiliates, wherever they may be. I don't have the list, someday I'll get one. But we're on all over the place. And mind you, this is one of 6 shows that I'm on yet each week. So go to DouglasVGibbs.com about all the radio programs that I am a part of or that I host. And getting ready to launch something new tomorrow on Friday night, early 7 o'clock. See if it happens on my Rumble channel, Mr. and Mrs. Constitution show. My wife and I have so many discussions in politics for the most part. We've been married 41 years. And it's only been the last couple of years that she's really paid attention and had an opinion and understands what's going on. Got an epiphany, I guess. It used to be, oh, that stuff is something Doug does. What a great hobby. Yeah, he's on the radio, whatever. Doug, how can I help you save your country? And she's got questions because she is always going to do it. This is the reason why I'm excited about this program that I'm going to have on Friday on my Rumble channel, Douglas V. Gibbs. And she has the same questions you might have. And that's the reason why it's a little fun. And so we're going to try to launch that probably tomorrow. If not tomorrow, then the following Friday. Depends on how tomorrow goes. The first shot, we're going to record at the beginning, and then down the road, we want to get it live, the chat room a little bit down the road. We'll see what happens. All right, that all said, there's a lot to talk about, as always, and I'm glad to be on Zachary Radio to talk about it. But I guess the big story right now is that the Senate approved Trump's $90 billion spending cut package. Now, I originally said to my wife, that was a $9 billion spending bill. And she says, oh, great. No. Spending in the other direction. And this is what's so amazing about first time in 35 years. 35 years that Congress has passed a rescission tax. In other words, where it's going to reduce spending. Now, that said, constitutionally, this is actually not necessary. What this is about is this is to codify in law Donald J. Trump's spending cuts. So, and we're talking $9 billion, like $8 billion of it USAID, $1 billion to PBS and PR and other places. And it's long overdue, don't get me wrong, but we are $37 trillion in debt. A $9 billion in debt. I'm not talking this is a good thing, but $9 billion, I hate to say this, $9 billion is nothing. It's a small, teeny little amount. We're talking about 1/10 of 1% of all federal spending. It's step in the right direction, but 1/10 of 1% of all federal spending, $9 billion is cut. And of course, Donald J. Trump's and Republicans' opponents are going down. They're freaking out. Oh my gosh, we're cutting this cut. They don't want the government smaller. They want it bigger. They want to spend more. They want it in your life, controlling, regulating spending. You know, back in 2007, I was part of a group of researchers, and what we did is we went through the entire federal budget, 2007. So this is a tail end of George W. Bush's presidency. And so I'm sure it's worse now since Obama and Biden and all that. But we went through the entire federal budget, all the spending of the time, way back in 2007, and we basically separated, and of course it's what we did with access. I'm sure there's some spending we don't know. But for what we can access, we took the spending, all of the spending, all of it, and we separated it into two pots, constitutional and unconstitutional. 85% of federal spending at the time, based on the original ideas and authorities and powers, based on the first 7 articles of the Constitution and all of that, original text, 85% of federal spending in 2007 we considered unconstitutional. I'm sure it's worse now. So when we talk about $37 trillion in debt, we're not even talking about spending. That's just the debt. And we are cutting $9 billion in this bill. And the reason that the Congress feels that they have to pass a bill modifying President Trump's executive orders cutting this money because of the Impoundment Control Act of 1974. The Impoundment Control Act of 1974 was basically targeted Nixon. President Nixon had trouble with Watergate, right? And now he's saying, I'm not spending money that Johnson was spending. I am not going to put it, I'm cutting that spending. And they said, we can't do that without congressional permission. And he says, yes, I can. So they passed the law, the Impoundment Control Act, to take away that constitutional power. When we come back, I'm going to go more into what the Impoundment Control Act, the president's power of impoundment. Don't go.
Hi, this is Eddie Floyd. Let me tell you about my favorite non-profit public charity, Wainema Wild Horse Sanctuary, located on the Forsyth Ranch in Hallelujah Junction area. And please go to www.wainemaranch.com. That's WYNEMA ranch.com.
In northern Nevada, there's a one-of-a-kind home that provides temporary overnight lodging when veterans or family members are receiving medical care in the Reno area, some from hundreds of miles away. Too often, overnight accommodations are a financial and logistical challenge. Stephanie Tanksley and her husband are veterans who come for treatment from Bishop, California.
We were lucky enough to be connected to the guest house so that I could stay for 10 nights when my husband was in the hospital. So I was able to visit him every day. It was just a blessing.
Veterans Guest House is privately supported by individual and community donations from people like you who recognize our responsibility to support our heroes. And no government money is received for day-to-day operation of the house.
Please support this organization. The Veterans Guest House is an amazing resource for veterans. Supporting this organization is one of the best ways that you can donate your time and your money just to help our veterans and their families.
Find out how you can help at veteransguesthouse.org.
The all-volunteer nonprofit assistance league, Reno Sparks, is working to improve lives in Washoe County. Annually, they provide new clothes and grooming essentials to over 3,000 children through Operation School Bell. Students in Transition addresses needs of homeless teens. Find out more by visiting their website, renosparks.assistanceleague.org. These activities are funded by Assistant League's Thrift Shop at 1701 Vassar Street, open 10 to 4 Monday through Saturday.
Are you shy and don't want to talk on the air? Text us your questions or comments to 775-237-2266. Now back to the show.
Okay, so when we left off, what I was talking about was the impoundment. Impoundment Power Control Act. Yeah, it's 1974. So the presidential power of impoundment, that is the issue here on why this $9 billion spending cut package is in place. Is it necessary? Well, it's good to codify those spending cuts into law. But the thing is, the president has what's called the presidential power of impoundment. The president is not required to spend every penny appropriated by Congress on a particular item provided by law. Period. He is in the real world situation. The Congress can say, hey, so we've apportioned this much money for that item. You have to spend every dollar. No, he doesn't. He's in the real world situation. If he is going to spend less, he spends less. He spends the rest back to the Treasury. If he needs more, then he spends what he has, and then he sends a request to Congress to appropriate more funds for whatever it is, and they'll decide. But the idea is that the basic application, the political class, the judicial community, while they may have some importance in the interpretations, rulings, legislation, all of that, they cannot micromanage the president. His job is the real world situation. They're not in it. So let's get to the Constitution. Let's do this first. So let's just establish where the powers lie. Article 1, Section 1 of the United States Constitution. All legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in Congress of the United States. In other words, the power to create law, modify law, or repeal law belongs to Congress, Congress only. President cannot create law, modify law, repeal law, and neither can the courts, although the courts try to do it often. Article 1, Section 9, Clause 7 of the United States Constitution. No money shall be drawn from the Treasury, but in consequence of appropriations made by law. So, to pull money from the Treasury for expenditure, that's up to Congress. And then they say, okay, we're pulling this much out for this. Here you go, President. It's by law. Execute that law. Article 2, Section 1, Clause 1 of the United States Constitution reads, the executive power shall be vested in the President of the United States. The power to execute the law, execute the expenditure of that money, that belongs to the President. And it's his choice on how it's done, as long as it remains generally within the parameters issued by Congress. In other words, this is military funding for this missile program. So he can't go spend it on the planes unless he makes a request. But if he doesn't need it all for the missiles, he can say, hey, I only needed this much. Have some of this back. All right. Article 2, Section 1 in the clause regarding the presidential oath. I will faithfully execute the office of the United States of the President of the United States. Article 2, Section 3 in the second to last clause of the section in the Constitution of that section in the Constitution, he shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed. So there's twice it's saying that the president's job is to execute the laws of the United States. His job is to execute the actual doing of. Article 5 of the United States Constitution provides for a process to amend the Constitution. So any authorities or powers that may not be altered, eliminated, nor created when it comes to federal government unless it is proposed as an amendment either by Congress or the states and they're ratified by the states with 3/4 ratification. In other words, if the Constitution says this is the power, you can't take it away with legislation. It requires an amendment. So now, in the United States, supreme law of the land is the United States Constitution. The clauses I provided above just now establishes the following. The determination regarding where the federal dollars are spent may only be established by law, which requires a full legislative process. So how money is spent must be established by law. Bill proposal approved by both houses of Congress, signed by the president. All right? If there's a veto, it can be overridden by 2/3 of each house of Congress. Legislative powers only belong to Congress. The word vested means that it's exclusionary. Only the legislative branch has legislative powers. Only the executive has executive powers, execute the law. Only judiciary has judicial powers, separation of powers. The states also, there's a separation there. The states, as the parties of the social compact known as the U.S. Constitution, are the only entities that may transfer power, beginning with the Constitution's first 7 articles and subsequently through the amendment process, through which an amendment is not valid to all intents and purposes until it's been ratified. So once again, if a power belongs to the president, the only way to take it away is through an amendment process in which the states, through their vote, ratify it. The power is exclusionary. Executive powers authorized by the Constitution call for the president to faithfully execute the laws. The expenditure of the funds apportioned to executing the laws of the United States are not addressed directly because it's a part of his execution. The funds being spent are tied to the execution of the law by the president. In short, how much it costs is at the direction of the president based on the real-world application of the execution of the law in question. The presidential power of impoundment basically means that if the president believes the funds are not appropriate or the amount of funds appropriated exceed what is necessary, the president has the authority to spend or not spend as he believes is necessary, as long as those expenditures do not exceed the maximum amount of money appropriated. Therefore, if the president of the United States believes the amount that needs to be spent is less than what was appropriated, then he has every authority to spend the amount he needs to spend based on his discretion. If the amount of money that needs to be spent is greater than what was appropriated, I mentioned this earlier, then once the maximum amount appropriated is reached, in order for more funds to be spent, Congress must by law appropriate more money toward the item in question. To give you an idea of what I'm talking about, let's use an example we can relate to. If a mother gave her child $10 to spend on candy, there's no way the child can spend more than $10 because only $10 was given. If the child wants to spend more than $10, more money must be requested by the child and approved by the mother, and then appropriated by the mother in the form of handing the child the additional money. However, if the child spends less than $10, it would be unreasonable to argue that the child is required to spend the entire amount. However, since the money originally belonged to the mother, and it was her decision to give the child the money in the first place, unless she tells the child otherwise, the child is expected to return the remaining money after the purchase to the mother. Of course, if she says, keep it for something else, then the child may retain the money and spend it at a later time. If the child decides that spending money on candy is not in his best interest, after perhaps watching a video about the connection of candy to cavities, the child could return the entire $10 back to the mother. It would be unreasonable for her to say, no, I gave you $10 of candy. You're required to spend that $10 on the candy. Then again, perhaps due to various circumstances, the child decides not to spend any of the money on candy, but in the near future plans because getting to the store will be easier on that future date, or a sale on candy is expected in the near future, and the child knows he'll be able to buy more candy with the $10 if he simply waits until the sale begins, the mother, if she's reasonable, would not demand the child to spend the money the day she gave it to him. If she earmarked the funds for candy, then he needs to spend it on the candy. But when he spends it on the candy, would be entirely up to him. All right, how about another scenario? Because I want you to understand this dynamic here. Let's go with another scenario. Perhaps the $10 was given to the child by his mother for him to go pick up a dozen eggs. The store, however, is selling eggs for $5.99. So he buys the eggs, returns home with his $4.01 change because the entire $10 is not necessary for the eggs. The goal of purchasing a dozen eggs was accomplished. So the change is returned to the mom. She's not going to be like, no, I gave you $10 for eggs. Return those eggs and find someone who will sell you a dozen for $10. I mean, you have to spend all the money. Or perhaps he finds out before he departs that dad picked up eggs on the way home. The expenditure is no longer necessary. So rather than buy eggs anyway, the child would be expected to not buy the eggs because the purchase is unnecessary and then return the funds to the mother. The presidential power of impoundment is similar. Congress apportions a particular amount for a particular federal issue, so the president who is tasked with executing the law takes the money and plans for its expenditure. If the expenditure, once he attempts to apply it in a real-world situation, turns out to be an expenditure that is damaging or problematic, he may choose not to spend the money on that item. He cannot suddenly spend it on something else different, of course, because it was apportioned for that original item, so it must be returned to the Treasury to be reapportioned for something different or not spent. A situation may present itself that the apportionment exceeds what is necessary due to cost, or the amount needed, so the president may achieve executing the law without spending the entire amount. If that happens, fantastic. He pulled off a great deal, and the remaining funds are then returned to the United States Treasury. It would be unreasonable for Congress to argue, no, we gave you the amount we gave you, find a more expensive route and spend all the money. That would be, for lack of a better way of putting it, fiscally irresponsible. And sometimes the president may choose another route. Spending the money immediately may not be the best avenue to take, but he may hold the funds and spend it on the apportioned issue in the future when he believes it would be more appropriate. For example, Congress might allocate so many billions of dollars on warships, but the desired size of the fleet has been reached. And increasing the size of the fleet at the moment may not be necessary. However, a few years, there may be a few more ships slated to be decommissioned, and so the expenditure may need to be delayed until a later date so that the new vessels are completed at a time that coincides with the decommissioning of the other vessels. He's commander-in-chief, and for Congress to demand that he must spend all the money at the earliest possible moment would interfere with his duty as head of the military, an argument used by President Johnson, in fact, Democrat. And through their demands, in a sense, it would allow them to violate the concept of a separation of powers by demanding that he spend as they demand when they told him to. And finally, sometimes situations change. Between the time the money is apportioned by Congress and the president spends it, events may occur that renders the expenditure apportioned a moot point. The president, recognizing that the situation has changed because he's in the real world situation, he's in that now and can make those decisions. Congress did it beforehand, so why would they be able to dictate to him? He would, and then if no longer necessary, he returns the funds to Treasury. It would not be reasonable to expect him to spend it because Congress originally earmarked it when it's no longer necessary. They didn't know about the coming change, though, in the situation. And among the founding fathers, presidents, George Washington through James Monroe, the presidential power of impoundment existed. Thomas Jefferson, who would be definitely labeled as a fiscal conservative, and one who is recognized as understanding the original intent of the Constitution, is one of them. Let's go to break. When we come back, I'll complete my thought.
This is Peter from Nevada Real Estate Radio. I talk about the subjects that help you as a home buyer, seller, or investor. Some people might just focus on the negative things, so guess where they're going? We do it differently. We focus on the positive aspects of today's real estate opportunities. You might have to navigate through some murky waters, but we're here to help you achieve success. Nevada Real Estate Radio, Thursdays, 3 p.m. on 93.7 FM. Nevada Real Estate Radio.
Hi, I'm Dr. Dennis Patterson. I'm the founder and owner of Nevada Advanced Pain Specialists. At Nevada Advanced Pain Specialists, we take a comprehensive approach to treating patients with chronic pain in the greater Reno, Tahoe area. We believe in the biopsychosocial model. This means we use multiple disciplines such as massage therapy, physical therapy, behavioral health, and medical treatments to treat your chronic pain. A plan of care is tailor-made for each individual patient. We always recommend conservative care first, but offer minimally invasive treatments when necessary. We are your one-stop shop. If it hurts, we can help. We pride ourselves in providing passionate care and making you feel welcome and understood. We are located in Reno and in Sparks, so give us a call to schedule a new patient consult at 284-8650. Again, that's 284-8650. Or visit our website at nvadvancedpain.com. We hope you choose Nevada Advanced Pain Specialists to be your center for injury rehabilitation. nvadvancedpain.com, 284-8650.
And what you doing with your phone? Taking pictures?
No, I'm asking it questions.
Like what?
Hey, Bobo, do flowers have best friends?
I'm sorry. I'm afraid I don't know that.
Hey, follow me. I want to show you something. Look, flowers do have best friends.
Whoa.
Some answers can only be found in nature. Discover the unsearchable. Visit discovertheforest.org to find a trail near you. Brought to you by the United States Forest Service and the Ad Council.
To join the conversation, call 844-790-TALK. That's 844-790-8255. Now back to the show.
And welcome back, Douglas V. Gibbs, Mr. Constitution. This is Mr. Constitution Show. So earlier I was talking about what all the affiliates are, and my engineer sent me a nice little list. America Matters, Zaki Radio, 93.7 FM, Reno, America Matters Media, Radio for America, LaRue Press, the Kevin Jackson Network, Salem Media Group, which I'm also a part of with 2 stations down in San Diego for my Mr. Constitution Hour by Douglas V. Gibbs on Saturday nights at 8 p.m. Pacific, and on all of the podcast stations, just type in Mr. Constitution Hour by Douglas V. Gibbs and AM 860, which is interesting. So thank you, Mr. Producer / engineer. Appreciate that information. Now, let's get back to what we were talking about, because we're talking about the presidential power of impoundment, and really the person who set I guess what you might call a precedent regarding the impoundment power was Thomas Jefferson. Once again would not argue that Jefferson did not understand the Constitution. His interpretation of constitutional authorities was not flawed. Of the presidents in the history of the United States, especially the Founding Fathers' presidents, Jefferson was among the presidents of the United States who understood the original intent of the Constitution the most, save perhaps, James Madison, the father of the Constitution, and John Tyler, who was kicked out of the Whig Party because he refused to abide by their unconstitutional demands. But in the case of Jefferson's use of the presidential power of impoundment, the initial occasion was regarding $50,000 provided for gunboats along the Mississippi River. And at the time, the western edge of the United States was at the Mississippi River. Disputes with France and Spain over jurisdiction regarding the river, America's use of the river, and U.S. access to the port of the city of New Orleans led Congress to believe that U.S. military presence on the Mississippi River to ensure that the river route was unobstructed by actions of other countries was the purpose of the movement of supplies and products needed to be increased. However, the Louisiana Purchase in 1803 changed the situation. America's western frontier moved westward. The Mississippi River in New Orleans was now fully controlled by the United States. Both banks of the Mississippi River was under United States jurisdiction. And so, and since both were now fully inside America's borders and jurisdiction, using the money for the production of the gunboats called for by Congress was no longer necessary. So President Jefferson based on the changes to the situation at large, did not spend the money based on his own discretion, and the money was returned to the Treasury. Granted, he also used the power of impoundment regarding other issues, which were not so cut and dry, but a lot of it was Adams spending. He didn't want to continue spending the way John Adams had in the presidency before him. But the reality is that the founding generation at the time recognized that the power existed. While the president, based on the legislative appropriation of funds, may not spend beyond a maximum amount of money provided by Congress, Congress could not require him to spend a minimum up to and including the maximum. The president's discretion when it came to the funding required to execute the laws of the United States belonged to the president, not Congress. The next president to use the power was Ulysses S. Grant, and many presidents during the 20th century also utilized the power of impoundment, Democrats and Republicans alike. The power was recognized as being legitimate, and while minor challenges emerged, the power was largely uninfluenced and unquestioned. It was considered a constitutional power. So if it is a constitutional power, if the Constitution gives the power of impoundment, according to everybody, then the only way to get rid of it would be an amendment to the Constitution. It was fully understood that the President of the United States may spend less than Congress allocates on certain projects if he deems the full funding amount unnecessary, and the power was recognized as existing and acceptable until Congress changed the rules unconstitutionally in 1974. And that brings us to that Impoundment Control Act I mentioned earlier. And it was a response to Watergate, the impending resignation of Richard Nixon, and his unwillingness to spend federal funds in the manner Congress was demanding. So they used legislation to strip the president of the power. Regardless of what one might think about the presidential power of impoundment and whether that the president should have it, the following facts surround it. It was recognized as a legitimate constitutional power of the president of the United States until 1974, and in 1974, Congress used legislation to strip the president of the power that had been previously viewed as being constitutional. Powers granted and retained by the executive branch, as previously stated, are vested in the President of the United States. Therefore, they may not be stripped, altered, or granted by legislation. Any change of powers granted to any branch of government requires a constitutional amendment. So, the Impoundment Control Act of 1974 is unconstitutional. Congress had no power to strip the president of that power. And while it is Congress's job to use legislation to determine where money may be spent, congressional control over how much of it is spent is not constitutionally granted, and in real-world applications is unreasonable and could be disastrous. Hence, this bill that's codifying Trump's cuts is unnecessary, unconstitutional, and them believing it was necessary is based on an unconstitutional law, the Impoundment Control Act of 1974. So while I'm glad they're codifying his spending cuts so that the Democrats will shut up, it was necessary partly because of their screaming and partly because of that unconstitutional law. It is Congress's job to legislate. It is the president's job to execute the laws of the United States. Due to the concept of separation of powers for Congress to dictate to the president how he may carry out his duties and to restrict his authorities established by the Constitution with a piece of legislation is unconstitutional, which is another way of saying that the 1974 law was illegal. Which brings us now back to President Trump and the promise to use the presidential power of impoundment, which is what he's been doing, USAID and so forth, and now they feel like they got to pass a law. He has every constitutional authority to reduce spending, to say, hey, we're not spending that anymore. Now, he can't just take that money and spend it somewhere else. He sends it back to Treasury. It is being rescinded. It is being put back, which is what this law is doing. But it's his authority. It's his decision. Now, the establishment is responding by using the Impoundment Control Act, and fortunately, it's passing through Congress. What happens if the Democrats get control of Congress? What happens if, in the midterms, they grab the reins? Then what happens? Now, that said, I don't see it happening. The Democrats, first of all, we've got Trump pushing for election changes to make them more secure, voter ID, redistricting, all of that. And a majority of Americans think that most Democrats and a good number of Republicans in Congress should be voted out. 6 in 10 voters said that most of the establishment in Congress do not deserve re-election. 60% are saying they should be gone. Only 41% of voters said that most congressional Democrats deserve re-election. 58% say that most Democrats in Congress do not deserve re-election in that same survey. 60% of voters said they think that most Republican members of Congress don't deserve to be re-elected because they're not working with Trump as much as they want. 28% said they view the Democrat Party favorably, and I just saw something earlier today that has it even below 14%, marking the lowest favorability rating for Democrats in the history of polling. So what's going to happen in the midterm? Well, the Democrats, they don't have the upper hand like they think they do. They're not in position to have a chance to stay in office. I think what we're getting ready to see is, let's look at it this way. Traditionally, out-of-power parties have the advantage in midterm elections. Whichever party is not in power, because Americans don't like either side to be in complete power, typically. And so every midterm, not every midterm, but most of the time, what you see is the party out of power winning in the midterm. But here's the thing, for the Democrats, that's not materializing this time. And it's a big problem for the Democrats. I was looking at their chance of winning or advancing in the midterms, and according to CNN, in July of 2025, right now, the Democrats have a plus 2% margin in polls saying that they have a chance to win. So it was 7 points in the previous 7 points in the last two previous, where when the Republicans were power and the Democrats were trying to win a midterm. So they've lost 5 points over time. This means that this is something different. The party as a whole may have lost, but they're not able to clean up with the independents, because the independents are not saying, okay, now we don't want to let the Republicans have too much power, so we'll vote in some Democrats. The independents, moderate Republicans, conservative Democrats feel good about Trump. And so what we're looking at is because they recognize what the Democrats are up to. They recognize that that their whole platform is hate Trump. And President Donald Trump has consistently raised concerns over election integrity. So any chance to cheat as the 2026 midterm elections loom also could be out the window, because the Trump administration is reaching out to several states to shore up election security. The Washington Post reported that the Trump administration has begun a multifaceted campaign in several states to inspect voting equipment and gather voter data to make sure that it is a secure election. This could be a problem for the Democrats. This could be a problem for them. The electoral process and the electoral college, of course, is there so that that democracy doesn't control everything. That's the other great thing. We have this electoral college in which the rural areas have a voice. Could you imagine we got rid of the electoral college? The 5 or 6 biggest cities in the country would vote for president. Nobody else's votes would matter. That's what a popular election would do. Electoral college makes sure that Iowa matters, New Hampshire matters, Nevada matters. And so that's what it's all about. I'm going to get a little bit more than the electoral college. Let's take a break. When we come back, let's talk about the electoral college, and then I want to talk about the rise of Trump. Don't go anywhere.
Barbecue, the Butcher's Kitchen, would like to thank every customer for your loyalty and continued support through these challenging times. Call for takeout and delivery of rib tips, brisket, ahi, tuna, roasted veggies, and much more. Barbecue's open from 11 to 7. Monday through Saturday, and delivers hot food safe and healthy. Call 499-5855 for details. 499-5855 Barbecue, as featured on diners, drive-ins, and dives. Get real. Get into Barbecue Reno.
Okay, we are running a car drive right now to help veterans all across America. So if you have an old car, truck, or van, even a motorcycle or an RV sitting around, you can right now give it away and help the vets. They really need your help. And your car will help support the vets and their families. And guess what? You even get a tax donation. Plus, we'll even come and pick up your car for free. And all you've got to do is pick up your phone right now and make a free call. Now is the perfect time to do something good for the vets. Give back to the vets right now for all they've done for this country. And your old car can really help them. So call the Veterans Car Donation Program right now for free pickup of your vehicle. Help the vets and help your taxes at the same time. Call right now.
800-296-1259. 800-296-1259. 800-296-1259. That's 800-296-1259.
Have you been injured in an accident? Trust Adriana Guzman-Freilich at AGF Law, your local personal injury law firm in Reno. At AGF Law, we pride ourselves on being honest, hardworking, and ethical. Let's meet in person to understand your case and fight for your rights. Located near South Virginia and Plum, we're always ready to help. Don't navigate the aftermath of an accident alone. Call Adriana at 775-453-9595 or visit adrianalegal.com. Your recovery is our priority, and we're committed to getting you the justice you deserve.
Want to expand your advertising dollar? Sponsor this or any America Matters program by calling 775-827-8900, extension 2. Now back to the show.
And welcome back. And if you want to help sponsor my activities, go to douglasvgibbs.com, douglasvgibbs.com. I am on the air 6 times during the week, and some of it I pay airtime, some of it I don't. I have advertisers on the shows where I do pay airtime, but sometimes it's just not enough. Listeners like you are the ones that help keep it all rolling. If you enjoy this content, if you appreciate the content I put out here on Zaki Radio, America Matters Media, Salem Media down in San Diego County, KMET on Saturdays, and the other places where I am on the air, help fund it. Go to douglasvgibbs.com, hit the donate link on that main page, just scroll down, or become a $9 a month patron. Just go to the join link in the link bar, click that, comes up, $9 a month. Less than what you pay for that funny cup of coffee that's way full of too much caffeine from that place with the mermaid gal in their picture, right? Right? Okay. So, yeah, $9. Just don't drink one cup of coffee per month and send the $9 my way to keep me on the air. All right. Now, I mentioned the Electoral College a moment there, and I want you to be aware how important the Electoral College is. And, Warhamster, which I'm also on the air with right here on America Matters Media, Zaki Radio, Warhamster and I on Wednesdays at 11, same time slot, just one day earlier than this program. If you're not catching it, me and Warhamster Brady, we're talking about this kind of stuff, but he and I also work on videos together, Refederalist report videos, and we're going through Madison's notes on the Constitutional Convention. And in fact, in the last video, just go to Warhamster's Rumble channel, and we were talking about how the Electoral College got brought up during the third week of the remember, this is 5 months, 4.5 months worth of debating for the Constitution during the summer of 1787. Third weekend, someone brings up this idea. I believe it was James Wilson. I'm not positive. I'm not, a lot of names. You don't always remember them exactly right, but I'm usually pretty close or right. But during the third week, the Electoral College idea gets brought up. It gets shot down. One state votes yes. The rest of them vote no. That doesn't mean it was over. It wound up coming. Why? Why did they do that? Why did they ultimately, why did the Electoral College become a part of the system? Why did they create? People go, I don't understand it, and I gotta get rid of it. We want democracy. No, you don't want democracy. In a democracy, the cities control everything. In a republic, the rural areas have a voice too. All of America votes for president, and matters with the Electoral College, not just the 4 or 5 biggest cities in the country, and then nobody else's votes matter. Because of the Electoral College, all of America matters. America Matters Media. Hey, how'd that work out? Working out good, because the Electoral College is an awesome idea. At first, it got shot down. It wound up coming back. It wound up getting approved. So what is it really? Remember, democracy is dangerous. And they didn't want democracy, but they didn't want aristocracy either. Originally, they were arguing, many of them were arguing that the national legislature, in other words, Congress, should vote for who's president, because he's serving the federal government. He's handling external affairs. He's not in the lives of the people. That's what their local government is for. Why would the people vote for the president? Plus, also, we're afraid of democracy, right? But then the argument's like, yeah, but the people've got to be a part of the process. How do you make the people a part of the process without them totally having pure democracy? And how do you make a pseudo-aristocracy a part of the process, but don't allow them to have total control? Electoral College. And so that's what they created. And originally what it was, the people would vote for their elector for their region, and then each house of the state legislature would vote for an elector, and then those electors would vote for president. And then the majority of the electors would be who was president. Originally, the second place winner would be vice president. With the 12th Amendment, they changed that to where the presidential election and the vice presidential election became separate elections. So even when you get your ballot and it says like Trump/Vance, it's actually unconstitutional. Vance is supposed to run on a separate, he runs separately, individually against the other. That would make it entirely possible for somebody else to get vice president other than who the president wants. But anyway, so that's a different story. So the Electoral College, that's why it's there. Okay? So the Electoral College protects us from the excesses of democracy. That's why it's there. But, and the funny thing about it is, as we go through all of this, Donald Trump defied the system. Donald J. Trump defied the system because their attitude was, the reason why the left wants to get rid of the electoral votes because whenever a Republican won, more often than not, a few times, they did it without getting the popular vote. So they figured, we're always going to get the popular vote. If we get rid of the Electoral College, the Republicans will never win an election again. Suddenly, President Trump wins the presidency, not just the electoral vote, but the popular vote too. I mean, the establishment's hold on politics has been entrenched for nearly 200 years, and they've been trying to do things like get rid of the Electoral College. Since the fall of the Whigs, we've had a two-party system. I know people go, I hate the two-party system. The problem is the two-party system comes natural to us. If you're hypothetically to get rid of the two parties right now, no political parties, what would happen is an issue would come up, there'd be people for it, against it. Birds of a feather flock together, they choose leadership, boom, you have your parties. So the two-party system is what we do. So first of all, we can't get away from it. So for those of you who are out there, I hate the two-party system, we need to get rid of it. And replace it with what? A uniparty, a dictatorship? That's dangerous, right? Or 15 parties? That's what Austria has. And you know what happens? They all wind up in one of two coalitions. Essentially, they still have two parties. But because there's 15 parties, no party is able to get a majority, and so nothing gets done. So the two-party system is what we have, and it works. It works better than you think. Now, that said, where we get upset is when it's a uniparty. In other words, on the surface, you see two parties, but the machine deep down is all one big giant establishment, one big giant Leviathan, and they're all just feeding off of it and feeding from the same trough. That's why I enjoy Trump, because he's messing that all up. He's putting a kink in those works. Third-party candidates normally don't win. Outsiders typically can't get inside the hollowed halls of the two major political parties and that Leviathan. The machine deep beneath the surface runs like clockwork. Unknown, unseen, uninterrupted. H. Ross Perot, remember, tried to make a stab of disrupting the status quo, right? But in the end, he wound up just like all the other outside attempts, failing. The arrogance built up. The arrogance of their fortified political zone The establishment didn't worry. They're not worried about disruptors. So when Donald Trump, really an outsider, a third-party candidate, but winning under the Republican banner, began talking about running for office and then did, nobody was worried, not anybody in the establishment. It wouldn't happen. It couldn't happen. The pundits scoffed. The pollsters smirked. The political class dismissed him as a sideshow that would fade away like all other fads and leave the election to the experienced politicians. But on November 8th, 2016, the American people delivered a thunderclap that shattered the Beltway machine and confused the bureaucratic beast. And Donald Trump was elected 45th president of the United States. And then once he was in office, they didn't know what to do. And they didn't understand how they lost. Hillary Clinton was the inevitable successor to Barack Obama. There was supposed to never be a Republican again. Their attitude is they were on their way to one-party rule. And nobody had a chance in their minds, especially that billionaire star from The Apprentice. The polls said so. Well, it must have been the Russians, they clamored. Well, the win was not a fluke. It was a revolt. The win by Donald J. Trump began long before, years prior, when the Tea Party emerged. Remember that? Tea Party wasn't Republican. It wasn't Democrat. It was an American movement. I spent a lot of time with the Tea Party. I was a part of that Tea Party. I enjoyed that time with the Tea Party. Trump's victory was because of the Tea Party. And really, historically, I guess you could say that Trump's victory was the political equivalent of the Boston Tea Party back before the launch of the American Revolution. A populist uprising against a ruling elite that had grown arrogant, insulated, and contemptuous of the very people it claimed to represent. The media called it shocking. The establishment called it dangerous. Millions of Americans, though, those who had been waving flags on overpasses and holding Tea Party rallies in their communities for the past decade, they called it liberating. The experts failed to see the movement bubbling up from the voices and rallies of the frustrated masses. They couldn't see it. For decades, working class Americans watched as their jobs were shipped overseas, their communities were hollowed out, their community development was etched out based on a United Nations global agenda. And their values were mocked by coastal elites. They were told that their patriotism was passé, that borders were racist, and that their faith in God belonged inside in the shadows or inside the four walls of their church, and that's it. And then Donald J. Trump emerges, and he's a man that not only heard them, he spoke for them. He spoke for Americans, and he said, hey, they're after you, but I'm going to stand in the way. I'm going to be the target. I'm going to take the arrows and the attacks. Now, Trump's 2016 presidential campaign was anything but polished. It was not polite, but it was powerful. He didn't listen to the political consultants. He didn't tweak his campaign based on polls or public opinion. He stayed true, remained on what he said. He ran on a promise to blow up the system that had betrayed the people. He railed against the globalist trade deals, unchecked immigration, endless wars. He called out the fake media, the deceptive lobbyists, and the lying bureaucrats who pulled the strings behind the curtain. He called out groups, he called out organizations, and he named names, and the people responded. 2016 was not just an election, it was a reckoning and an awakening, and it was only the beginning. And then in 2024, it happened again. And it revealed that Donald J. Trump was among the most popular political figures in the history of America. And as a result of the election of 2024, the realization is that Donald Trump is not going away anytime soon. The left is even more losing their collective mind. The man has changed the party, changed the country, changed politics. And now he's changing the world. They see him as a potential threat to the whole system. He is a threat to the system, their establishment, their cabal. And I trust him. I trust him as he moves forward. I trust him with what's going on. And I hope you are too. DouglasVGibbs.com. United we stand, combined we kick butt. God bless America. And my friends, God bless you. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye now.